I
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 2024 episode of Night with the Experts. We have a wonderful expert with us tonight, Tammy Thatcher, who is an author, researcher, and nuclear safety expert. This is a program that is put on by Nuclear Energy Information Service every last Thursday of the month, with the exception of November, 7 o'clock Central Time. You do have to register for the event, and the events will be recorded and eventually put on YouTube. We understand that there may be some competition tonight. We were informed that CNN has some sort of a program going, and we did attempt to contact them and ask them to reschedule, but they never did get back to us. So unfortunately, the president and the ex-president will not hear Tammy's remarks tonight. But you will, and you'll have an opportunity to ask questions and get into dialogue with our expert and with each other. So on that note, I'm going to pass it over to our co-host and NEIS board member, Jan Budart, who will introduce tonight's guest. Jan, take it away.
Well, thanks everyone for coming, and I'm really pleased with this audience. It's quite nice. I want to introduce Tammy. She's a mechanical engineer and a nuclear safety analyst, and she did risk assessments for the Idaho National Labs. She also wrote editorials that were published in the Idaho Falls Post-Register, and all of her work is now available at her website, which is called Environmental Defense Institute.org. Tammy was particularly moved by the Fukushima Daiichi accident, and it has really informed the way she has responded to the nuclear problems in the United States. And with that, I want to introduce Tammy Thatcher and turn the meeting over to her. And when she is finished with her presentation, then we'll get acquainted with her by asking questions and making comments. So go ahead, Tammy.
Does everything look all right? Am I on the... Can you see my slides? Can you hear me, Jan?
We can hear you fine. We do not see the slides yet.
You don't see the slides.
So hit the share screen button and then try it again.
Okay. See, your screen is showing up over the top of mine, perhaps.
Oh, there we go.
There we are. Okay, we did this once, but it was too early. Okay, all right, there we are. So my talk tonight, the downside of expanding nuclear energy, the unspoken high costs and harm, kind of got kicked off by the Department of Energy's draft environmental impact statement on its high-enriched low-assay uranium program. And the comments that I prepared for that draft EIS were something that Jan found, and then that led to this talk, this invitation to talk. The Department of Energy is proposing to increase electrical generation from nuclear energy in the US by a factor of 3. And it's proposing to do this without actually considering the waste it's going to generate from that. And we're going to talk about how in the ditch things are with the radioactive waste and spent fuel the DOE already has. I go to a lot of meetings, cleanup meetings to do with the Idaho National Laboratory and the legacy radioactive contamination from years of operations at the site in Idaho. And I read a lot of other documents, and I've attended other meetings, Nuclear Waste Technical Safety Review Board meetings and so forth. And there's a lot of things that the Department of Energy and the nuclear boosters don't want to talk about. And they're very good at not talking about things that are really important. The high costs and the risks, the problems of spent fuel. The existing problems are already enormous, and they don't like to talk about the radiological emissions from operating reactors and the entire uranium fuel cycle. The Department of Energy is making claims in its HALEU EIS and a lot of other documents, including paid actors to do YouTubes that it posts. The Department of Energy is claiming nuclear energy is needed to combat climate change, claiming it's affordable, claiming it's necessary and reliable baseload power, that nuclear energy is clean, has a small footprint, and it's safe. But these claims really are misinformation. Nuclear energy is far too slow to deploy to make a difference to combat climate, and too expensive. Just the construction costs make electrical energy from nuclear energy unaffordable, but that's not even counting the cost of disposal. They want to hint at reprocessing, but they don't want to talk about the costs of reprocessing or the pollution. Nuclear energy is so slow to deploy, it will ensure that fossil fuel plants stay online. In Kemmerer, Wyoming, they're converting coal to gas plants. All the talk is about the Bill Gates TerraPower reactor being built there, but the reality is that they'll be converting coal plants to gas plants and not counting on nuclear energy there or nearly any place else. Nuclear energy, with all of its radiological emissions from mining, milling, fuel fabrication, reactor operation, disposal, other radioactive waste dumps, it's anything but clean. And when you look at all of the uranium fuel cycle, it is not a small footprint. And when you look at the airborne radiological contamination, and in many cases, groundwater contamination or ocean contamination, it's not a small footprint. This is a slide from the decade-old Blue Ribbon Commission report, but it's still a helpful slide for the nuclear or the uranium fuel cycle, mining, milling, conversion, enrichment in uranium-235 for a reactor, fuel fabrication facilities, operation in a nuclear reactor, then to storage, which from storage you would hope to go to disposal, or you could go to reprocessing to recover uranium U-235 or plutonium-239, put that back into the fuel. Reprocessing creates vastly more volumes of waste, as the Blue Ribbon Commission report pointed out. Nuclear energy, they like to always say, is safe, but we've learned you have a Fukushima, a Chernobyl, a 3 Mile Island about every decade. Permanent evacuations may be needed due to accidents or terrorism and war. DOE likes to claim that spent nuclear fuel just isn't a problem because the volume of fuel could fit on a single football field less than 10 yards high. Well, that's a claim they like to make. They like to hint that reprocessing, like to call it recycling, would solve the waste problem. They like to say Yucca Mountain, just a political issue, no technical issues. And they've issued advertising YouTube saying some new reactors, like the sodium-cooled reactor, will burn the waste. So let's talk about that. Fitting on a football field 10 yards high. The reality is that Yucca Mountain, for just 70,000 metric tons of spent fuel, needed 41 miles of emplacement drifts. You have to still cool the fuel because of the decay heat. You have a criticality potential of some of the fuel. You don't want it so close together that more than one canister go critical. It's completely fictitious to look at the volume as though you could compact it into this compacted space. And so they will give these fictitious lines, and then there's no other questions. The meeting is over, and they've succeeded in disinformation about the difficulties of spent fuel management and disposal. We've got commercial nuclear utilities very sensitive to the cost of long-term storage. They don't want to repackage the fuel. They don't want the liability of transporting spent fuel. The Department of Energy wanted the fuel packaged in disposable containers. The utilities saw that as extra cost and refused to do it, put it in canisters that were not designed to be disposable. Every assumption about Yucca Mountain, initially assumed, has been found to be highly flawed. So many things were not resolved, including how to install titanium drip shields, which were needed to limit the migration of radionuclides as water trickled through the proposed Yucca Mountain. Proposed but never granted a license to construct Yucca Mountain, which was defunded in 2010. Recycling or reprocessing would double the cost of nuclear energy. It's highly polluting, creates more waste, but by hinting at it, DOE doesn't include the costs in reactor cost estimates, doesn't put the pollution in an environmental impact statement, just continues to hint that, well, that would be the solution. Claims that new reactors would burn the waste. All reactors can fission plutonium. And fast reactors are better at fissioning plutonium, but you fission plutonium or uranium and you're creating more fission products and other radioactive waste. And some of their claims that they would reduce the volume of waste by reducing the amount of U-238 they dispose of, that does very little to simplify the disposal problem. So it's not just the volume, it's which radionuclides you're disposing of. So taking away the U-238 it reduces the volume, it doesn't make disposal easier. This figure shows the weight percent of what's in some commercial reactor spent fuel, mostly uranium-238, but you're generating plutonium and other actinides like americium. You're generating long-lived iodines and technetium, which dominate repository performance, cesium and strontium, which add an enormous amount of decay heat for the first 300 years or so. So looking at the weight percent doesn't give you an indication of the longevity of the waste or the difficulty of its management and disposal. Nuclear energy in the US has provided about 20% of electrical energy for a number of years. The number of reactors has decreased, but it's stayed about a constant 20% of electrical energy in the US. At any given year, some reactors operate almost all year, while other reactors are shut down almost the entire year, and others are somewhere in between. If you have a 1,000-megawatt reactor, you need 1,000 megawatts in replacement power when that's shut down. whether it's for a routine outage or for an unexpected breakage or repair that's needed. To recoup the high construction and operating costs, nuclear plants want to operate at maximum power as often as possible, squeezing out intermittent but lower cost electrical sources. So recover costs of building, they need full power operation, maximum capacity, and no premature permanent shutdown, which does happen. This is a figure just depicting the number of commercial reactors or stranded fuel sites in the US. And this is a figure, the red line that is showing the total inventory of spent fuel. The green line is showing the amount of spent fuel put into dry storage. So as spent fuel pools filled up, they started putting spent fuel into dry storage. And you can look at the figure and see that Yucca Mountain was in the licensing process about 2008, and we were already ramping up putting spent fuel into dry storage. But it wasn't being put into disposable containers, and none of it has been put into what the Department of Energy considered disposable containers. So you'll see these slides where it says DOE does not consider canistered fuel an acceptable waste form, because there's haggling over who's going to pay for repackaging the spent fuel for disposal. There's also the problem of, as that fuel sits there and ages and the canisters age, it may need to be repackaged just to continue to be safely stored. So even without any new nuclear plants, 140,000 metric tons of commercial fuel is expected. Yucca Mountain had a 70,000 metric ton limit. The original license submittal was for commercial fuel and for Department of Energy owned and military fuel. Now DOE's estimates are for just the commercial spent fuel. And it likes to lowball the estimates looking at, well, this is the amount of spent fuel we have today. No, but they know that with the existing reactors and their licensing life remaining, they can expect 140,000 metric tons of spent fuel from existing reactors. They're not even talking about what to do with the spent fuel that would arise from tripling the amount of nuclear energy production. And they certainly don't like to mention that these higher enriched fuels require more space in a repository. They absolutely complicate designing a repository. Now you need several. The Department of Energy has no program for siting a single repository. This is a picture just depicting the non-commercial DOE-owned fuel, military and DOE-owned spent fuel, for which there is also no program for a repository anymore. DOE stopped collecting fees for a repository in 2014 from ratepayers because it has no repository program. DOE had promised to take spent fuel in 1998. Money was to come from the judgment, or money is coming from a taxpayer-funded judgment fund subsidizing spent fuel storage costs. And again, the industry refused to use disposable packaging because of cost. The dry storage that we have was designed and conceived of expecting it would be placed in a repository within 20 years. That's not the case. The technical basis for long-term storage of dry canisters, DOE admits it's inadequate. They're doing some tardy non-comprehensive and unreliable research to try to say they haven't decided that it's completely unsafe. They're still working on it for the existing fuel that we have. DOE is presenting consolidated interim storage as a solution and seeking sites to accept consolidated interim storage. The interim storage doesn't plan to have repackaging facilities or reprocessing, and it's being, they're seeking consolidated interim storage without having a program to site a permanent repository. So they're merely shifting the problem from one community to another. DOE is paying a consortia, what they call a consortia, of various universities, for-profit businesses, and some nonprofits to help seek communities who would be willing to host consolidated interim storage. And DOE has admitted they will actively withhold information from communities about technical issues and problems, like it's stuck there and has no place to go and you can't transport it anywhere when you have no place to transport it to. There's a plethora of new reactors, over 30 new reactors, but some of the main ones, the TerraPower sodium-cooled fast reactor that Bill Gates is involved with, slated for Kemmerer, Wyoming. High-temperature gas-cooled reactors that use HALEU fuel, that's called triso fuel. Some microreactors. There's research for exotic reactors that's also on the menu. The NuScale reactor, which was a lot more like a conventional light water, pressurized water reactor, was canceled, but they were hoping to use more highly enriched fuel in that project. Each new fuel type, cladding type, enrichment, burn-up, reactor coolant requires additional repository research, and the higher enriched fuels and the smaller reactors create bigger disposal problems for an equivalent electrical energy generation. Fast reactor history has proven these to be unreliable baseload reactors. The French managed to get their Super Phoenix fast reactor to operate about 8% of the time. And that's one of the bigger successes out there. Japan didn't manage that. TerraPower was pursuing a traveling wave reactor for many years and didn't get anywhere with that, finally settled on this scale up of an experimental breeder reactor. And both TerraPower and the Department of Energy like to claim it will burn the waste. But we know that they're using brand new HALEU as the starting seed fuel for this natrium reactor. There's tons and tons of spent fuel out there. There's tons of waste. They're not burning the waste. They're starting with brand new HALEU fuel. And so it's really interesting to have the Department of Energy be such a source of free advertising and promotion. High temperature gas cooled reactors have been operated in the United States, in the UK, and in Germany and other places. And they all have tended to be financial economic failures and shut down prematurely just due to economic problems and maintenance problems. No stunning accidents, but economic failures. There have been no processes developed for reprocessing the fuel for gas-cooled reactors. It's going to be more impractical and more costly to reprocess than other fuels. So I highlighted an article to look at there. The NRC's licensing of NuScale was to provide a standard design approval for NuScale for their 50 megawatt electric modules. And NRC left open important issues like the unique heat exchanger with propensity to density oscillation waves, which could lead to premature failure of the heat exchanger and accidents. Despite NRC actually saying that their standard design approval didn't constitute a commitment to issue a permit or a design certification, DOE and the nuclear boosters oversold the approved design. NuScale upped the power level of the modules, claimed it had approval, which it didn't. NRC, went along with trying to promote the industry. Not really putting its foot down and holding people to meeting any safety standards. And it certainly didn't address anything to do with fuel disposition for any of the reactors it reviews. So risk-informed regulation has to do with advertising low risks if it's favorable. And if something doesn't look favorable, just withhold information. Don't provide it. Anything that people think they understand about Price-Anderson Act liability compensation or coverage for reactors, it is so different when you're looking at the exemption of reactors under 100 megawatts electric are exempt. Doesn't matter if you have 100 of them in a group. There's reactor power limits that are exemptions to coverage. It's a very different thing when you're looking at not having large utilities with large income generating from electricity owning these reactors. It affects liability coverage, and people are going to be surprised at what's not covered. So I'll just speed it up here. DOE's disposal program is one broken promise after another, and they admit they have no repository program. There's a YouTube with DOE's Paul Murray, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Spent Fuel and Waste, and he admits there's no repository site or design or program. The higher enrichment fuels are a problem. And so his emphasis is on messaging with the help from hiring social scientists to convince the public that disposal and transportation will be safe. And he stated, transportation of spent nuclear fuel may be one of the safest endeavors in the history of the world. So today this was in the news today. And I thought, well, isn't this a nice example of freight cars could be carrying oil, stacking to provide maximum temperatures for an accident if you did have a fire. And you also have the radiation that's exposures just from the presence of spent fuel on a cask. But when DOE has no program, hire the social scientists to make people think it's all right. And that's where we're at. No dry transfer systems to repackage spent fuel have been designed, and we have over 70 sites with aging canisters. The canisters are susceptible to chloride-induced stress corrosion from chlorides in the environment. DOE has been studying the problem for over a decade and won't discuss how many years before canisters fail. But we're seeing people not able to license them or even pretend they're going to get licenses for more than 80 years. And potentially canisters can start failing within a few decades. But utilities know this. They do not want to have the cost of repackaging dry spent fuel. Nobody knows when a repository, if and when one will ever become available. A single canister, it varies depending on the fuel and the burnup in the canister, but a single canister has a host of radionuclides that, even if you consider that a lot of them won't go airborne, if you were to stay within 50 meters for 30 days, you would have over 1,000 times over what it would be required to kill you. I think it's hard to have a concept of what the magnitude of radionuclides is in a single canister of spent fuel. New Mexico and Texas were granted by the NRC, granted licenses for consolidated interim storage. Both those states have fought that licensing process with a successful ruling that the NRC didn't have the authority to authorize away from reactor storage. But that's now being taken to the Supreme Court of the United States. So we'll see where that goes. DOE likes to point to France and their MAX program. The US actually had a mixed oxide plutonium uranium program. The DOE had a MOX fuel facility and sunk billions of dollars into it. It was a failure. They failed to make a fuel of a quality that anyone wanted, even with Areva's help, and they supposedly knew how to make MOX. DOE's large programs have more and more been utter failures in recent decades. And looking to recycling, and the MOX and the France example that's what DOE is doing, but it's a very poor example. Reprocessing creates vast amounts of surplus PU, plutonium, and we already have we're awash in surplus plutonium. HALEU fuel increases weapons proliferation threats. There's been some recent articles about that, and the fact that anything over 10% enriched in U-235 is a proliferation threat, and the HALEU fuel is up to almost 20% enriched. And that proliferation threat isn't just at the reactor, it's at the enrichment facility, it's at the fuel fabrication facility, it's at the reprocessing plant. So that, DOE claims there isn't a proliferation problem, but it's creating enormous proliferation problems. So another unmentionable thing is the harm. And these slides this is a hard to read slide, but workers in the US are allowed to get 5 rem per year, or 5,000 millirem per year. But there is evidence of elevated cancer risk in radiation workers for a decade or so at an average of 400 millirem per year. Other countries only allow 2 rem per year. Public exposure, the EPA allows 100 millirem per year to any member of the public, and it's not monitored. It's loosey-goosey. But there is evidence of increased infant mortality and damage to infant harm at doses around 100 millirem or less. You're never going to see the NRC or DOE talk about this. It's a pretty important thing. So the monitoring at routine operations or accidents, dismal history of poor monitoring to know what's actually been released. And when the industry likes to average a release. So over the year, on average, it didn't exceed a certain amount. But averages don't count if you're the child forming in utero. Maximums count. DOE canceled its only appropriate epidemiology study. So we have Congress passing bad legislation, and they don't understand how misinformed they're being, by the Department of Energy. The recent Bill 870. I don't think Congress really understands that. I don't fully understand that bill, but I'm pretty sure that most of the people who voted for it, if they understood it, they wouldn't vote for it. So here's some of my references, and I know I ran long, and so now I'll take questions. And I'll just come up to you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Tammy. And I wonder if you would mind going back to your references, that the screen with the references, because I don't think you kept it up quite long enough for us to
Oh,
take a
right.
look. Yeah. Oh, the screen, the one with the references. It was like the next to the last one you put up.
Yes, I'm just not so graceful at scrolling.
Oh, there we
Okay.
are.
Well,
Okay, I've got DOE's HALEU EIS. I've got the link for my comments, because I comment a lot about what they left out of that EIS. I have a newsletter that was an article, 20 questions people ought to be asking about expanding nuclear energy. These are just a few references. DOE's tripling nuclear energy. This article by Sandia on cost estimates of disposal, where they're doing a cost estimate, even they don't have a repository site, they don't have a repository design. They're taking a Yucca Mountain estimate and massaging it a little bit and saying, here's a disposal estimate. It's completely lowballed disposal estimate for a portion of the waste that doesn't include all the waste we have in the pipeline now. Doesn't include new nuclear energy that DOE is promoting. And DOE does come out with inventory reports on the current inventories. And a few other highlighted reports that I wanted to highlight to people, but I have other references in my comments, EIS comments, and in my newsletter articles.
that was a extraordinary history and collection of every radioactive waste issue possibly imaginable. You're getting a lot of questions in the chat about making the slides available somewhere. And if you want to put a link in the chat before you leave us tonight, or tell us where people can go for that, that might be good.
Okay.
Well, I tried the website, and I see from this screen you've got up right now is that it's www.environmental-defense-institute.org.
Yes.
And I had left out the hyphens, and so I didn't get it. But now I
Right.
see, how to, and that
Use the hyphens. If you Google my name and Environmental Defense Institute, you'll probably come pretty close to it. The homepage has this HALEU comment report, 50 pages of bedtime reading, and it also has this PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, so that's where the presentation will be, is at your website.
Yes, it's just on the homepage, and I'm going to say, I've been, how if you put your email out there, you can get a lot of spam and stuff. So let me just verbally say here, you can email me at tzt@srv.net. That's like Tango Zulu Tango at snakerivervalley.net, tzt@srv.net. and you can ask me questions and I'll try to answer them.
Okay, so we are getting questions in the chat, and probably the best way to ask a question, if we could go back to this screen where we have, where we see everybody. If you raise your hand, that's a really good way to ask a question. So you go down to the bottom where the little heart is and it says react. And I'll show you. You raise your hand, see, and you get a hand like that. And then it's easier for me to call on you. David, could you change to the screen where we see everybody?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
Tammy, you need to stop screen sharing.
Okay, that's what I need
Yeah,
to do. Okay.
all right. So, oh, that's,
There. How's
now,
that?
if you want to ask a question, raise your hand, and we'll try to go to the ones in the chat, but it's a lot easier if you raise your hand and ask your own question. Even if you put one in the chat, we'll call on you to read it. So let's see. Does anybody, I had a question. Oh, well, let's go to Rebecca first because she has her hand up. Rebecca, would you mind asking your question now?
Yes, I would appreciate it if you would go back to slide number 15. I have a question related to slide number 15.
Oh. So you need to start screen sharing again? And
Oh, 15 is just the map of the United States?
Right. Well,
Okay.
yes, there's a reason why I have a question.
Let's see. It's not terribly current. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, I have a question about Hanford. What they call Columbia Generating Station number 2,
Right.
CGS2. I think you're showing that it has been operating for 20 to 29 years.
Yeah, this is a 10-year out of date picture.
Right. I was just going to say, I'm aware that they're at the end of the first 40-year license, and now they're relicensed for another 40 years.
Right. It's a Blue Ribbon Commission report is 10 years out of date.
Okay, well, thank you.
And their information would have been somewhat out of date when they published, but
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you.
but I felt like they wouldn't take it too hard if a government funded report like that, if I used their picture.
Oh, that's fine. I just wanted everybody to know
But
that.
you're right.
I mean, imagine 80 years on that one. And it has problems from time to time. There have been some leaks that I won't go on about that, but thank you for your information. I really appreciate it.
Well, the dry storage issue of how long the canisters last, how safe they are to transport after you stored them decade after decade. It's one of those unmentionables the industry doesn't want to talk about. The commercial utilities want to get out from under the costs and the liabilities of that. And the nuclear promoters don't want people to know the truth about some of the dangers of dry storage. Certainly not while they're trying to get a community to accept a consolidated interim storage facility so DOE can give the illusion of a solution by saying we've got consolidated interim storage in some faraway place. What's to worry about spent nuclear fuel?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
okay, Dave, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thanks. We've encountered frequently with dealing with the small reactors, whether they're the small modulars or the micro nukes, everything in between, the issue of security. first of all, the companies are promoting the reactors as being more secure, therefore they would not need security around them because of their design, which is kind of weird. We've had safety experts from the Department of Defense saying there's no way that this can enhance national security. My question to you is two-part. In your analysis of the fuel systems, what has the conversation been on actually providing security for these facilities so that fuel either doesn't get diverted, tampered with, affected by terrorists? And then second question is, of course, these people want to export this technology internationally. And what is the plan for security for exporting manufacture of HALEU and other exotic fuels, if you've run across any of this?
Well, the HALEU, the Department of Energy's HALEU EIS acknowledges that they had comments about weapons proliferation issues. And they write an answer, it's just not a problem. I think if you look at DOE's, it's the typical EIS non-answer to a serious issue. And one of the things about people in the nuclear industry is that they all know, and I knew as I worked at the site, people would say, well, if I draw the line on this and they fire me, they'll just hire someone else who will go along with it. It's understood, if you say anything bad about the nuclear industry, no matter how truthful it is, you risk your employability. Doesn't matter, from DOE people, government people, to contractors that work for DOE, people at universities, even private consultants know that their careers can be compromised severely if they use the wrong adjective in front of the wrong people. Being truthful is hazardous to your career. So they're not. They all go along with whatever the fiction and the withholding of information calls for of the day. That's what they do. They consider that a part of their employment, and so the nonsense can be pretty frustrating, but don't be naive. I mean, it's not that they don't understand there's a problem. They just have decided, they can't market these things if they admit there's a problem, so they're not going to admit there's a problem. And the article, that current kind of one of my non-proliferation slides that I thought, boy, I better speed it up here or I'm gonna be in trouble. Let's see, this one came out this month, and these guys are putting a finer point on, you really can make a bomb with material that's above 6% enriched, certainly 10% enriched in U-235. And we're talking about 100 kilograms. I mean, sorry, 1,000 kilograms of HALEU fuel. So if you have a reactor that's, if you've got a canister of that fuel that's got over 1,000 kilograms, that's not very much material. That's all it takes to make a bomb. So they're saying, a single core over 10 concepts, there's enough material in a single core or more than to make a nuclear weapon. And so it's frightening me to no extent, the mobile reactors. You can have one show up next to your hospital, next to your house. There's no stopping it. My question is, where's that spent fuel going when that reactor is shut down? When that spent fuel needs to be refueled, where is it spent fuel going? Is it going to Idaho? That's part of the whole push for consolidated interim storage. They need a place to send the fuel from these micros, or it's going to be sitting next to your university, next to your hospital, next to your home. But you can count it's not going to be sitting next to some rich congressman's beach house. You can count on that.
I just want to point out in this slide that two of the people who are authors of this article, Edwin S. Lyman and Frank N. von Hippel, have been experts on this program in the last at least 2 years. I hope that gives gravitas to slide number 45 that Tammy is showing us. And I'd like to move, I don't see any other hands, so I'd like to move to Lori Johnson. I hope she's here, but she made quite a long comment with several questions. And I'm just, Lori, if you're here, you could read your comment or I will read it. Do you want to speak up?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
You can
Go
hear?
ahead, Lori.
Okay. Well, basically, we need the recommendations concise to governments that are going to be here as long as the nuclear impacts last. That's hundreds of generations. So, I mean, when y'all look around, it doesn't even sound like y'all think you have a government now, because you're talking about the businesses that seem completely ungoverned. So how could we do this? How can we get a government in place that is going to survive whatever kind of corrupt system is going on now? I mean, there are laws that the USA has not, they've never negotiated lawfully for any of the resources or territories. So how can we get recommendations, like all the details y'all have on how to handle the spent nuclear fuel? How can we get that in the hands of governments who are going to be here, 100 generations from now?
Well, I would suggest starting, my 2 cents is, I would suggest starting with daylight. Mainstream media is not questioning what the DOE is feeding them. There are facts out there that are being so distorted by DOE. We can't count on mainstream media, and it used to be you could get editorials published. Anything anti-nuclear is very difficult to get published these days, and even when it is, the paper will just provide 5 other articles to outweigh it, even if they're nonsense. So we can't rely on mainstream media to get the message out about the truth. And so programs like this to try to get the message out, I think, are really important. And I think that so many people who are not in the nuclear industry get mystified. So many acronyms and all this science. And so I better leave it to the experts, and they're telling me I'm stupid if I think there's a safety problem, That's the message everybody gets. So there's a need for daylight, and it's just gotten so frightening. And then this new legislation would apparently allow companies to get taxpayer money to design a reactor, turn around, have DOE hyping all the great things about it, NRC doing a partial review and approving it, with reservations, and then you can sell that nice reactor to a foreign country at a big profit. I mean, it's the need for daylight is getting greater and greater, and people who are not part of the nuclear industry are the ones who we need to reach in a way that isn't oversimplifying, but isn't intimidating.
So Lori, it looks to me like you have a lot of ideas about indigenous people and the solution to this problem. Am I wrong about that?
My people are Yamasi. We're indigenous to the southeast Caribbean coast of North America. And I think I met you at the nuclear summit in 2019, maybe.
In
Jan,
Albuquerque?
and yes, and
Yeah.
thank you for your work. Thank you all. Thank you, Tammy. This is great. So I just, that all of everything, the development that's going on is unlawful. It's not legal. So I think, we do need all of this information so that we can assert things legally, but that needs to be addressed. I mean, the USA organization it could form a government and negotiate with indigenous peoples. They've never done that. They're operating outside the law completely, from the time of its inception to now.
Do we have any other questions? To me, that's an extremely valuable comment, Lori, because I'm so into Gordon Edwards and his dependence on the Iroquois and Anishinaabe Declaration of 2017, which I kind of wish I could find, but I'm not sure I can right now. I'm going to ask Carolyn Kroom to ask her question, please.
What were the 20 questions that should be asked about? I think it was the HALEU.
Right.
I'm sorry.
I put together 20 questions, and the first one is nuclear needed to combat climate? And others, is it affordable? So some of the DOE claims that I started off with, that's covering a lot of it. And it went into really the things we covered. Is it a proliferation threat? Where are we at with disposal in Yucca Mountain? Is nuclear affordable? Is it safe? What are the routine emissions, and are those safe? So you can find that newsletter on that website. We covered pretty much those areas, and my HALEU comments to comment submittal covers a lot of those things. But I wrote up those 20 questions last fall, and I tried to get people to read them, and it was, Congress was busy, everything was going crazy. It was, but I do find, even I work on something, and even if it seems like, even if I'm the only one who read it, I built on it, and it helped me going forward. But I still think, I felt like all these decision makers at the state level and Congress, federal level, need to understand these 20 questions. They need to be made to answer these 20 questions when they support this legislation. But I know that my chance of success talking to my own state legislators, boy, Mike Simpson has a street with INL research buildings on it. And I can't get very far with my own legislators in this state, I don't think.
Okay, thank you.
Jan, you are on mute if you're trying to direct here.
Oh, I apologize. I called on Janice Wilton.
Okay.
Hi, I'm in Ontario, and we've got a big mess of nuclear coming up here with our present Conservative government. But I just can't understand, can't you take people to court for lying through their teeth with really dangerous stuff like this? I mean, it's one thing to convince them, but I mean, I know up here there is an issue with waste site, a mound of 7 stories high of supposedly medium waste upriver from Ottawa. And it's being taken to court, but by First Nations people, because supposedly they're supposed to be respected. I mean, because everything we went through with the residential schools for the children, there's been a lot of focus on that in Canada and trying to make amends for that to some point. But I mean, just legally, can they just get away like with lying like that about so much stuff, and they never get held to account in the court system? Thank you. Your information is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. And I have this, the same kind of question myself, especially when DOE's hiring actresses to say, did you know there's a reactor that can burn the waste? And they're being so misleading about all of it. And it's taxpayer funded advertising that's going to benefit TerraPower. But every time I study something and I think, well, I'm not naive anymore, I really know what it's like, then I study, when I dove into looking at 3 Mile Island, the accident, and the epidemiology, and the monitoring, and the cover up there, how intentionally shoddy the monitoring was, how underprepared they were for the monitoring. And then when they have these excess cancers show up in 5 years, the epidemiologists fall all over themselves saying it had to be stress.
Yeah.
And that you still have, they've redone the epidemiology in some different ways at different times, but they still have these outliers with the leukemia, and none of them will even discuss it. Boy, no stress like that in the history of the world has caused so many leukemias.
Yeah.
So, you have a lot of, everybody went lockstep with, oh, the doses were low for 3 Mile Island. But if you look at what was released in the monitoring, no, the doses weren't low. Not in those hills, not with the low wind speeds and those gases coming off and those hills and that gaseous radionuclide air wafting up to people's homes. The cover up at 3 Mile Island. Boy, you had a documentary about Chernobyl come out, and the Idaho National Laboratory held like 3-5 meetings to have experts say Chernobyl only caused a few thousand excess thyroid cancers, and as you know, nobody dies from thyroid cancer. But you know what? Babies need thyroids, or they're not prepared to breathe when they're born. An unhealthy thyroid is a bad thing for a child developing in utero. The only thing you look at is death by cancer. You miss a lot. And the industry is intentionally actively avoiding looking at all of the health outcomes that have occurred. So people get misinformed, and then it's just a habit. But you look at the weapons testing at the Nevada weapons test site, and DOE was brought to court, and DOE fought, said those sheep didn't die because of radionuclides, they were starving to death. And they would hire experts to say, yep, those sheep were starved to death. It wasn't that their intestinal linings had been shredded from radionuclides. But Utah won, and then was reversed on appeal. And on appeal, the government said, the Department of Energy wants to release radionuclides and lie about it. It has sovereign immunity, and it can do so.
That issue was really a big deal when I was a kid in Salt Lake City, because we learned, we heard, oh, did you know that a whole flock of sheep died, and nobody knows why. And I was in Salt Lake City, so it didn't, we didn't know any better. I wonder if you'd mind stop sharing your screen right now, Tammy, because I have something from the indigenous community that I kind of wanted to put on the screen because of Lori's contribution. So if you don't mind, I'd like to,
Oh, yeah. Okay, there we go.
okay,
I
let
found
me,
the button. Okay,
let's see.
good.
No, now I don't know what to do. Shoot. Oof. Oh, yeah, I do apologize. I thought I knew how to do this, but I don't see how I'm going to get the things up that I need to see.
Do you need to click share? Do you
I
need
did
to
click share.
click share, and then did you have some to select from? And
You need to have the document open already.
It's already open if I
Okay.
could get to the screen.
So if you open share, then click on that one that you want and it should come up.
Open share. Oh, okay, maybe this will work. No, I'm sorry, I can't. I should have practiced this. I don't know how to share my screen, so I will
Well,
bow out.
Then let's see if we have any other questions or comments that people would like to make.
Yeah.
Be sure to raise your hand using the react or the reaction button on your screen, and we'll take you in order. And I'd like to let you know that we were just informed that we had a greater market share of viewers than the debate on CNN. So congratulations to all of you who stayed with us tonight. So
Oh, Stephanie has a question. And Nancy Morris. Okay, let's go with Stephanie. Unmute, please. Stephanie, I thought I saw your hand up. Okay, well, we'll skip Stephanie for now and go to Nancy Morris. Nancy, can you unmute and ask your question, please?
Yes, just basically, I was wondering about, can you, Tammy, identify where you may have those 20 questions that you would like to ask the legislators? Are they somewhere on your website that it's available
yes,
link?
yes. They're not on the home page. They're on the publications page, and it's the August 2023 timeframe.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Stephanie, are you still wanting to ask a question? Please unmute, Stephanie.
Stephanie sends a note saying she has a problem unmuting here. So we'll see what's going on. Let's see. Well, wish I knew what we could do. We can't unmute you. You have to do it on your end somehow. And while we're waiting, if there's anyone else who has a question or a comment you'd like to make, now would be the time. Nancy again, please unmute.
Yes, I was just wondering regarding the Blue Ribbon Commission map and its datedness. Is there anything that's equivalent, that's up to date to us now in, say, 2023 or 20, something that is more timely?
Yes. There is a government agency called the Nuclear Waste Technical Review Board, nwtrb.gov. And they have meetings throughout the year and they issue reports. I'll say I went through this last month or the month before that. NRC issues licenses for dry storage facilities, and sometimes a utility will have more than one vintage of dry storage. So it'll have like more than one license. So you'll have a different number of licenses than actual plant locations. And then there's variations. Do you count Fort St. Vrain, for example, which is DOE owned fuel. It's not owned by a commercial utility anymore. So there's different ways that they slice and dice. If you're looking at just commercial reactors, you wouldn't include Fort St. Vrain, you wouldn't include the 3 Mile Island fuel debris you have at the INL, or Peach Bottom fuel at the INL. So there's some different ways to slice and dice it. If you look at commercial fuel versus DOE owned fuel, if you look at just a location in a state versus the number of independent fuel storage system licenses. So between NWTRB and also NRC.gov will have a variety of maps and tools. And any one of them will be 1 or 2 years behind when you go looking. So you can have a lot of fun looking at, there's 94 reactors, but there's more than that reactor sites. And so you will see different numbers floated around, number of sites, number of dry storage locations, and that's why there's kind of a variety of ways to dice it and describe it, and as well as be out of date.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay, let's go back to see if Stephanie can unmute now. Oh, there you are. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I have a nervous finger, but anyway, the problem was way back when I had to hit, that this is being recorded, and I never hit that. So it wouldn't allow me to unmute. But anyway, I wanted to bring up something that President Biden initiated in January of 2020. It was called WEJAC, White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council. And in 2021, this was their comment. In a report issued in May, WEJAC recommended ruling out nuclear power under the Council's criteria for federal investments that maximize benefits and avoid harm in environmental justice communities. Rather, WEJAC concluded that nuclear power is not beneficial to environmental justice communities who are on the front lines of radioactive exposure, contamination, and environmental degradation across the entire nuclear fuel chain and radioactive waste streams. In the 70s, there was the Church Rock, the mill, overrunning, and that was in the late 70s. And then there was TMI. And as bad as, the government's reaction was to help those people at 3 Mile Island, it was worse to the indigenous people at Church Rock, New Mexico. So it is definitely an environmental justice thing. And they have had, the WEJAC Commission has come out asking, more stringent cutbacks for nuclear, but it seems that the administration keeps giving them more money under the Build Back Better and the Inflation Reduction Act. Our government just doesn't seem to get it, or they don't care. It's not a question, it's a comment.
Well, I'll comment back. Something that was shocking to me last August was the NWTRB meeting, and it was actually held in Idaho Falls. I don't travel much, so I went to this meeting because I live in Idaho Falls. And they had many slide presentations. And again, these NWTRB.gov, those meeting presentations are available online, and transcripts are available online. They had a lot of presentations on social justice. They had a lot of presentations by social scientists. And they were very careful to state that that DOE was going to comply with all the laws, and that social justice was foremost in their mind, and negotiation and communication with tribes was emphasized again and again and again. So who do you think they're targeting with consolidated interim storage?
Mhm.
And I mean, so it was shocking, and then it was the first time I'd ever heard of the consortia of universities and for-profit businesses and anybody off the street who can give DOE names. Who do we connive and who do we bribe to get this accepted? And so you're right on target, and I just want you to know who's in the crosshairs.
Hmm.
And you can it was actually, you know, I mentioned it in the presentation, but it was stunning that, you know, the question was asked, you know, of DOE, are, you know, as you're giving information and special tools to the members of the consortia who you're paying, are you, you know, will the communities that you're trying to get to approve interim storage have access to the same information? And they said, no, they won't have access to the details or in conversations that we have with consortia, the communities we're targeting to get interim storage approved will not have access to that information. I mean, you just wonder if you're living in America, that the Department of Energy would admit this outright and would have not even any shame of how they were going to withhold information. And they were actually bragging about they're going to study the messaging, see what messaging works,
Mhm.
and you know, they're studying who do they contact, who do they need to bribe, what incentives do they need. And so it's pretty frightening. It's been, I think a lot of people don't understand how much misinformation there has been given about dry spent fuel storage and the hazards of it. Did you know that neutrons emitting from those canisters are making carbon-14 outside the canister? 6,000 year half-life? Did you, I mean, and the canisters, when one fails, they don't have a method to repair it. They don't have a method to confine it. So,
Carolyn, you've lowered your hand, but maybe you still want to ask a question.
I'm okay. I was wanting the website for the NWTRB, but Tammy repeated it, so I got it. I was in a similar situation trying to count the number of commercial nuclear power plants and this, that, and the other, and I was getting on the different websites, and it was, just like you were saying, Tammy, it's a mess. Nothing is real accurate, and I think it went from 95 to 94 just to, a couple of months ago or something like that. And
operating reactors.
operating
But the
reactors.
number of dry storage sites is going to stay larger
Yeah.
and increasing. The number of operating reactors is shrinking, but the number of dry storage spent fuel storage sites isn't shrinking.
Yeah, well, this was about the Sierra Club has been, and I'm a member of the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club has had 2 of 3 movies on nuclear power presented for free. This third one will be presented for free in September, and someone in the Sierra Club had done a blurb about, how many active plants there were. And I was thinking, is that right? Because I was having to write something for a more local Sierra Club group, not the national group. And but the just for you guys' information, the movies were The Women of 3 Mile Island, and I think some of y'all probably have seen that because I think it came into Chicago through the International Uranium Festival, and then I'm trying to remember what one of the other ones was. Oh gosh, here I am. talking about.
Nuclear bamboozle.
Nuclear Bamboozle is the one that's coming in September, and it will be free through the Sierra Club for the entire month. And then there was one that was just
It was SOS. It was
SOS, right, the
San Onofre syndrome.
right. And but some of the information generated by the national group, I just wanted to check. I mean, I think you're more on top of it than I am for sure, but just wanted to check because I was trying to get it into some local newsletters. So I didn't mean to go on and on, but just that I'm really glad to see that the Sierra Club is doing this. So
I'm really glad you mentioned those movies too, because they're available. People can find them on YouTube. They may have to pay a small fee to watch them, but they're all three excellent and important for, timely. All three of the films are recommended watching.
oh, I totally agree. And oh gosh, what was I going to say? I don't know. Maybe I don't know if this organization would want to send something out about the one in September, but I could forward that information, and I'm sure you all probably have access to that information. But and it's really open to the public. It's not just Sierra Club members. And then there's
Yeah, we actually do help promote those, and our friend Mike Carberry, who's in the Sierra Club, is the one who is generating these movies from the Sierra Club. So I would like to call on Dave Kraft. He's got his hand up, and so would you mind unmuting Dave and asking or
Sure.
making your comment?
Yes, you may be aware of this, but I don't know that we really discussed it here tonight. It's been bad enough that the Biden administration has been promoting the small modulars, but due to some of the failures that you highlighted in your presentation tonight, they also recently came out with the idea that they would resurrect already closed reactors,
Right.
and that they are looking not only to extend operating licenses to 80 years at many of the reactors that are operating, but now they're also looking into power uprates at these reactors. If you're familiar with it, what would be the effects of these power uprates on the composition of the fuel and therefore the hazard of the waste that would have to be disposed of?
Well, every fission is creating fission products or neutron capture radioactive products, but the power uprates really create a safety problem, because your cooling systems, your reactor shutdown systems are all challenged more when if you were licensed for 800 megawatts and now you're going to run at 900 megawatts, you're challenging your cooling systems. You're challenging how the plant responds in any kind of an upset. Number one, it's the high burnup fuel creates disposal issues. Higher enrichment means you can leave it in the reactor longer without refueling, and every fission you make is making a more concentrated pot of radionuclides in that fuel. So how many fission products you make is going to depend on the enrichment and the burnup. If you're running at higher power, you may reach your burnup limit sooner. So you wouldn't necessarily have more radionuclides if you kept at the same burnup. But you're operating at a higher power, so you're challenging reactor cooling systems more. And that would be a concern, especially the aging plants, and that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, thanks.
Catherine Schutte made the comment that let's see, she said Columbia Generating Station at Hanford is applying for a power uprate, as well as proposing small modular nuclear reactors and also now doing a pilot project with Westinghouse. And you know, they should be cleaning up Hanford, not putting more stuff in there. So anyway, Catherine, I'm sorry for reading your comment.
No, that's okay.
Better read it yourself.
They also have run out of room for spent fuel and they are having to build a new pad. So, and they have had problems with their, some of the aging parts, even though they say their strategic plan is to run it for 80 years. They're having to do extended power outages in order to fix a part that they got from a vendor that failed and is unreliable, and so they have to replace all of them. And at their board meeting, they joke about, well, we're not quite at a Boeing moment.
Oh,
So there's a tale
oh,
of
that's really funny. That's a great joke. Yeah.
Hmm.
You know, it is 8:25, and we can close at 8:30. We would entertain more questions if anyone has them, but our usual closing time is 8:30. So, Dave, what does anybody else have a question that you'd like to ask Tammy? Oh, Lori's clapping her hands there. Um, I would, I hope, Lori, that you'll put your email in the chat because I still want to send you the slide that I was going to put up if I could have figured out how to share my screen. So there you are, eco@yamasi. Okay. So I'll send it to you anyway. Okay. And okay. So Dave, let's,
Yes.
okay.
I guess we will be wrapping it up. Thank you very much, Tammy, for a really excellent presentation tonight. And I know folks are going to be looking forward to seeing the view graphs from the PowerPoint. I would mention to everyone that you will all receive a copy of the chat tonight, which is just chock full of all kinds of links and helpful hints and whatnot. So that's part of the process for Night with the Experts, is we make sure you get the chat after this is over. So you can look forward to that. Next month, we have an expert, Jeff Mittman, who will be talking with us about the effects of climate change on nuclear power plants. And we hope you will join us for that. That should be on July 30th, I think, 27th. I don't have a calendar in front of me. Last Thursday, whatever it is, of July. So we hope you'll join us for that. And I will mention one more thing, a little self-promotion here. NEIS turned 43 this year, and we're doing our annual meeting on Sunday. So those of you who are members are welcome to join us. And if you would like to become a member, you can send us an email at neis@neis.org, or you can go to our website and we'll send you the registration link and you can join us at our annual meeting. It goes from 3 to 5 on Sunday, June 30th, that's Central Time. And the business meeting will be the first hour, but on the second hour, we're showing a segment of a dialogue between Carl Grossman and radioactive waste expert Kevin Camps. And Kevin has agreed to join us afterwards for question and answer and conversation. So a little bit of a treat and sort of a mini version of Night with the Experts taking place at our annual meeting. So we hope to have you join us at that time. So again, thank you so much, Tammy, for a really spectacular presentation. It is too bad that Bush and Biden and Trump could not join us and ask you some questions themselves. We'll send them the chat as well, I think. So
Thank you, Dave.
The July Night with the Experts is the 25th.
25th, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you so much, Jan. I
It was lovely having you.
appreciate this opportunity
Mhm.
to talk.
Okay. Thanks all.
Okay. I'm gonna have to learn how to chat myself. I'm kind
Well, I
of,
think it went very well, Tammy. Thank you very much.
I thank you very, very much. Again, I really appreciate getting to do this.